agree that Quran is the first source for any types of legislations. And we don't have to go through that. Allah Azza wa Jal had sent the Quran to be a source of guidance. And the Prophet, when he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he told him that let it be the first thing you call them for is to believe in Allah Azza wa Jal and the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. All of this, call them to the book of Allah. Let it be the judge between them and us. Then you go to the second source. And this is the Prophet's Sunnah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet's Sunnah is anything that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had said or done or approved. Generally speaking, this is what is related to fiqh. There's a fourth category, which is the description of the Prophet ﷺ, but this is related to seerah and to the shama'il. So any statement that the Prophet says alayhi salatu wasalam, this is considered to be sunnah. And the vast majority of what the Prophet says alayhi salatu wasalam is a revelation from Allah. It's wahi. Now sometimes he may make ijtihad, and he may choose to do something or say something which Allah does not approve, and Allah corrects it on the spot. So this is also part of wahi. And for example, when he frowned in the face of the blind man, the Prophet ﷺ frowned, and Allah immediately sent Surah Abasa wa Tawalla. So whatever the Prophet says ﷺ, إني كنت قد نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور ألا فزوروها. I used to prohibit you from visiting graveyards. Go and visit it, because it reminds you of the day of judgment, or as the Prophet said alayhi as-salatu was-salam. Also his actions. So the Prophet prayed in a certain way alayhi salatu was-salam. We should follow that. This is his sunnah. This is one of the sources of learning and taking evidence from the Sharia. The Prophet says alayhi salatu was-salam, صَلُّوا كَمَا رَأَيْتُمُونِي أُصَلِّي. Pray as you see me pray. Now, this kind of prayer, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is not verbally stated by him. Rather, his companions describe that to us. So this becomes also part of the sunnah of doing it and following it. What the Prophet approves of is considered also a sunnah. The Prophet once prayed Fajr alayhi salam. After praying Fajr, he saw one of his companions praying 2 rak'ah behind a pillar. He was angered by that and went to him and said, is Fajr 2 rak'ah? Is Fajr 2 rak'ah? So the man said, O Prophet of Allah, I did not pray the sunnah of Fajr, so after I finished praying with you, I prayed 2 rak'ahs of the sunnah. So the Prophet did not elaborate, did not comment, and went, which means that he approved what the man had done. So this is the second source of legislation, Quran, and then we have Sunnah. Then we have the consensus of scholars, and the verses of the Quran and the Prophet's saying alayhi salatu wasalam do back this up, and we have a lot of evidences to show for that. The ayah in chapter 4, Surah An-Nisa, where Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَمَن يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولِ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Whoever goes against the way of the Prophet ﷺ, not only that, and goes against the way of the believers, and Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on his soul, used to consider this to be an evidence of the legitimacy of consensus of scholars, because the scholars, when they agree upon something, then a Muslim should not go against them, and because they have the consensus. And the consensus is also something that a Muslim should pay attention to. Why is that? A lot of the Muslims think that if we have a lot of scholars saying something, that this is a consensus, and this is not true. Imam Ahmad says, whoever claims consensus, he's a liar. How do you know that one did not go against them? So how do we know if the consensus of scholars is they all agree upon an issue? Well, they say that, for example, the consensus at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when let me rephrase that, because the time of the Prophet ﷺ is unlike any other time. Now, do the companions legislate? The answer is no. Who legislates? Allah Azza wa Jal and the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This means that if someone comes and says, well, this issue, there was a dispute among the scholars at the time of the Prophet, this is unacceptable. Because at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet himself was the legislator, and he only can tell whether this is right or wrong. So the companions' difference of opinion does not count, and it does not exist. It rarely existed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because whenever there was a need for anything, they would simply go and ask the Prophet ﷺ. End of story. No harm done. So by this we know that we cannot come and expect the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, to legislate. This comes only from the Prophet ﷺ. After his death, yes, now the companions may differ, and we have to look into their consensus. If they have consensus over an issue, then this is part of the deen. If an issue that does not have a straightforward ayah backing it up, or a hadith backing it up, then the Prophet's companions' consensus is the ultimate. Or the tabi'een, or the generations after them. If we know that the whole generation agreed at a particular point of time upon an issue, this is consensus. And this consensus goes to the Day of Judgment. Not today we can come and say, the tabi'een agreed upon so and so, but now we have difference of opinion among scholars. This is unacceptable. Their consensus is binding for us, whether the companions, the tabi'een, tabi'at tabi'een, or any generation, 7th century, 6th century, as long as it was established that there was consensus in a generation, this is binding to all Muslims till the Day of Judgment. Then we have the fourth source of legislation, which is analogy, well known as al-qiyas. And what is al-qiyas? Analogy, it says in the text, if you wish, this means applying the ruling specified by a religious text on a certain matter to another matter for which no text refers. See, analogy has pillars. It has something that we have evidence on, and we have something that we would like to compare the ruling of this thing to it, but this does not have evidence to back it up. And we have also al-illah, the cause, the reason we made such an analogy on this. And there are many technical things. Basically speaking, if one comes to, for example, drugs, meth, cocaine, heroin, marijuana, all of this was not mentioned in the Quran. Well, if you want to cascade it a bit more, if you look at intoxicants in general, gin, whiskey, vodka, tequila, rum, brandy, any type of intoxicants, you would find in the Quran the word khamr. And usually this referred to wine at the time of the companions. So whenever you said khamr, this is what we do. We make wine out of barley, out of dates, grapes. It's something exotic, but not readily available in the Arabian Peninsula, but that's good. So all of these they make wine out of, but not all these intoxicants that we have today. So a person comes and says, okay, this is halal for me to consume such intoxicants because it was not mentioned in the Quran. Here we are in desperate need of qiyas, of analogy. So the jurors come and say, okay, what is the reason Allah made intoxicants haram? We find verses of the Quran, we find prophetic hadiths stating that ما أسكر كثيره فقليل حرام. Whatever intoxicants in large quantities, then little quantities are considered to be haram. And in language and in the words of the companions, they all say that intoxicants is whatever covers and hampers your decision making, whatever covers your brains and intellect and sanity. So they said, okay, this is the reason why it was haram. Allah tells us, do not approach, do not pray when you are intoxicated until you know what you are reciting and saying. So, it's something to do with decision making. It's something to do with, do I know what I'm talking about or not? Therefore, if we look at drugs, we find that it shares the same principle. It intoxicates you, it hampers your decision-making process, it has a lot of bad things in it that are similar to wine. So it takes the same ruling. Without this, it wouldn't be possible to move on and progress in life, because there are so many things that are new that were not stated in the Quran or in the Sunnah specifically. So do we come and say, for example, okay, riding a car is not in the Quran and the Sunnah, is it halal, is it haram? No. We have the general rule to apply. Likewise, analogy was given to us by the Prophet himself, ﷺ. The process of thinking was directed to us in the Quran and in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he himself was asked, alayhi salatu wassalam, O Prophet of Allah, my mother died and she did not perform Hajj. Should I perform Hajj on her behalf? So the Prophet says, if she had a debt on her, would you pay it off? Meaning to the people. The man says, yes. And he says, then Allah's debt is more worthy of paying off. So the Prophet is teaching him to measure, to make the analogy, to compare apple to apple, and then come up with a conclusion. So this is number 2 and number 3 and number 4. Quran, Sunnah, consensus of unanimity or consensus of scholars, ijma', and then analogy, which is qiyas. Then we have a third part of sources of legislation, and that is called al-istihsan, and it's called here subtle analogy. Subtle analogy is something that a lot of the scholars do not approve of, and there are a great portion of scholars that approve. For example, Imam Shafi'i disliked it totally and used to attack it furiously, because there are 2 types of subtle analogy. One which is based on merely whims and desires. The definition, he says, discarding the verdict of a clear analogy in preference of a subtle one, or discarding a universal verdict in preference of a particular one, providing that such process is based on firm evidences. What Shafi'i did not like is the type of istihsan that jurors used to come up with and failing to justify or to back it up. So they say that, yes, I think that this is halal or this is haram. Why? They said it's something that sparked in my head and I cannot explain it. This is not acceptable. A juror who is unable to explain his point of view, like Imam al-Ghazali said, he's not worthy of being a mujtahid. But when you have things that are backed up by the Quran and the Sunnah, so your analogy is weakened because the subtle analogy here overtakes it and would have more validity to it. Can you give examples? This is not a place to give examples in details, but just to give you a glimpse. We have a transaction called a salam, and a salam is to sell something you do not own or possess while promising the buyer to deliver at a specific time. Now, this goes against all norms. So the analogy would dictate that this is haram. Why? Because the Prophet prohibited in hadith, Hakim ibn Hizam, may Allah be pleased with him, to sell something you do not possess. And I don't possess it. But al-istihsan dictates that this is permissible because there is a type of transaction that the Prophet ﷺ permitted. How is that? I go to a farmer and tell the farmer that I would like to buy his crops. Let's assume it's oranges. And the type of oranges is well known. The species of oranges is decided because it's his farm. I know it. So I agree with him with three conditions. One, that he delivers me on the 1st of April 2020. Two, the quantity is dictated and we know that the quantity is 20 tons. So it's fixed. It's not something ambiguous. The harvest of your... No, it has to be quantified. Thirdly, the price has to be paid in advance. So if I wait till January to 2020, the prices would go up. But I buy it today with 20% off in advance, so I would make a profit after a while. The farmer would get cash quickly and not wait until the harvesting time, so it's a win-win situation. Here, this is istihsan backed by a hadith. Also, the issue of, well, someone would argue and say, this is backed by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Why would we call it istihsan? This is a hadith according to the sunnah. Khalas, it's over. This is true. Another example would be al-istisna'. What is istisna'? Istisna' is something that goes against the norm, against the analogy, but it's beneficial to the people. One. Two, it does not go against any specific hadith or evidence from the Quran or the Sunnah. What is istisna'? Istisna' is to ask someone to manufacture something to you. So I go to a vendor or a manufacturer and I say, listen, I have this mobile. I'd like you to produce 1,000 of it for me. So he's going to mimic and clone this mobile for me. He doesn't have it and I'm paying for it. So he's selling me something he does not possess. The scholars say this is permissible because he's manufacturing it, and all our affairs worldwide are dependent on it. It's unlike selling what you do not possess in the case that someone comes to me and says, listen, I'd like to buy this Hyundai, which is blue, and it's 2018 model with little mileage. And I said, I'll sell it for you. I'll take 40,000 riyals. I said, okay, here's a 40,000 riyals, or here's a down payment. And I go and I look for such a car. I may find and I may not find. This is selling what you do not possess, which is haram. And there's a lot of ambiguity. I could break my word. He could sue me. I could find something cheaper, something more expensive. By binding myself to such a transaction while not owning it, this is haram. Number 6, I think, is known as al-masalih al-mursala. It's in your textbook. And al-masalih al-mursala, called interests without ruling. This refers to matters that bring benefit to the people, but there is no religious evidence that approves or disapproves of it. Now, the interests without ruling, some are accepted because it has interest in them and the Sharia backs it up. So this is accepted. And some benefits are not accepted. So the Sharia tells you that this is cancelled and invalid. And there are benefits that are in between. And we have to look into that third one and judge it. Now, interest without ruling. When we come to hijab, for example, hijab is concealing women from the gaze of men, and it protects women. Does the Sharia support this or not? The answer is yes. Then this is accepted. Intoxicants, selling drugs, there is benefit in it when I'm selling. True or false? True. I'm making more money. Does the Sharia approve of it or not? No. So this is cancelled. Now we come to things that the Sharia does not approve nor cancels. And this is called al-masalih al-mursala, depending on the benefits that it brings the people and the disadvantages that it carries. And then we can judge. For example, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in regards of intoxicants and gambling that there are a lot of burdens in them and some benefits. Yet the burdens far exceed and overwhelms the benefits. What's the ruling? Khalas, you can understand that the ruling is it's haram. Likewise, when we come to something that the Sharia did not comment on, but the people need, having traffic lights at injunctions. So, is it permissible in Islam or is it prohibited? It doesn't say. It is something for the Muslims to decide, and if it's okay, then they come up with it. No one comes and says, oh, akhi, this is bid'ah, this is innovation. No, this is for the benefits of the Muslims. However, the problem nowadays is that a lot of jurors, scholars, students of knowledge have abused this concept of al-masalih al-mursala, to the extent that I've seen, and you've seen probably, students of knowledge altering and changing the deen altogether because there is benefit in it. So for example, people come to issues like insurance. This is the fatwa that insurance is haram. Why? Because it's gambling. You put a premium of $1,000, it covers you up to $1 million in losses. And if the year is over, your 1,000 is gone. It's like lottery. Buying a lottery ticket, and you may hit the jackpot, and you may lose what you've paid for your ticket. No problem. Those who justify things without knowledge would say, there is maslahah, there is benefit for the people when we say that insurance is halal. Correct, but Also, there is benefit when you legitimize selling of intoxicants. In our country, you will not have tourists who cannot get wasted and drunk. So nightclubs and bars and pubs would be maslaha. Subhanallah. They change the religion with this concept that is not mentioned in the Quran or in the Sunnah. Even the jurors themselves, when they look at the sources of legislation, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', at the bottom of the line, at the last part, they would mention al-masalih al-mursala, not at the beginning, because it is easily abused and it changes the religion drastically. Now, having said that, it can be implemented, but only by real scholars. Nowadays, we find students of knowledge giving workshops on what? On maqasid al-sharia, the aims of sharia, and what they mean is al-masalih al-mursala. They focus on this topic and they brainwash people, making them think that this is part of the deen. You can change 90% of Islam, Quran and Sunnah by masalih al-mursala. It dictates that we do this. Simon says, and this is totally bogus, totally wrong, totally haram. And by the way, the maqasid al-sharia, they making workshops on, no one from the Salaf had ever compiled books on them. Until maybe 100 or 120 years ago, nobody ever mentioned it as a separate science. Nowadays, people are twisting things and they are riding the tide. They're jumping the wave because they have the source and the means to change so many things that we have believed in and taken for granted, because it's the Quran and the Sunnah, and this is what the Salaf says. But says no. That was long ago. Now maqasid the Sharia dictates that we do this, that we do that, that women travel without a mahram, that we can be in seclusion with a woman in a room for necessity, that there is maslaha in someone who divorces his wife, that we cancel this divorce. A'udhu billah. What is this? And this is what's happening, unfortunately, nowadays, which means that we have to be careful when we come to that. Number 5 here in the document, because the first two were textual, texts, Quran and Sunnah, and then the qiyas, ijma', masalih al-mursala, and we have the customs of Muslims. In Arabic, it's called al-urf. What the Muslims relate to and know and acknowledge and accept to be the norm. And this is known. It's not something separate from the Quran and Sunnah, but for example, a man married a woman with the consent of her father, with the presence of 2 male witnesses. Marriage is done. Boom. A month later, the woman says, "Where is my dowry?" And the man says, "Yes, honey, I would love to give you your dowry. Here is $1. And the wife is insulted and says, "No, my dowry is $100,000. Now, we go back to the Quran, we go back to the Sunnah. We don't have any specific amount of dowry. So what to do? Here, the jurors go back to the urf. And they say, okay, the custom of the Muslims in this community, in the society, a woman who belongs to a family of this status, of social status, how much is her dowry? They would say probably X amount of money. We go to the husband and say, pay her X amount of money. This is the average. So it's not what she says, it's not what he says. We go back to the urf. And there are other examples of that. Number 6, the statements by the Prophet's companions, may Allah be pleased with them. And this is a respected source of legislation. So we don't have a clear evidence from the Quran, from the Sunnah, from Ijma', from the Qiyas. But we have a saying for a companion. Now, some schools of thought, as we will come to find out, say that the opinion of a companion is far better and greater than anything else. Other scholars said, no. If the companion said right and other companions said left, this means that we have a dispute between them and we cannot just cherry pick. Allah says in the Quran, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ. Whenever you dispute over an issue, then you have to return it and refer it back to Allah and to Ar-Rasul, to the Quran and to the Sunnah. So when the companions differ, it is not permissible just simply to take whatever you like and go with it. No, you have to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. So some schools of thought give preference to the companion's opinion over anything else. And some may consider it, but not as a priority, especially when there is a difference of opinion. Number 7, the laws of earlier divine religions. شَرْعُ مَنْ قَبْلَنَا شَرْعٌ لَنَا or not. And this is an issue of dispute among scholars. And the most authentic opinion is that in our law is sufficient for us to find all answers. We do not have to go back to the laws of the nations before us, because it would not be complete when Allah says, الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. Today I have completed your religion. If we need to go back to other religions, then our religion is not completed. And when you read the books of fiqh, you find strange things, because the jurors themselves were either mujtahid, meaning that they do not limit themselves to their imam or to their schools of thought. Rather, they expand far beyond that and look into the Quran, to the Sunnah themselves, and implement the same tools that their predecessors did and come up with a conclusion or with an opinion. Or the scholars are blind followers. So the blind followers would get the statement of the imam, of the scholar of the school of thought, and then justify it. Whether good or bad, this is not my problem. My problem is to convince you that what my imam said is true. But this is not true Islam. Allah will ask us and question us about the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the three righteous predecessors of the three favorite generations, the companions, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, and the Tabi'it Tabi'een. So now you come to an issue where people say that if someone pledges an oath to slaughter his son, is he obliged to fulfill his oath or not? And they say yes, he is obliged, because Ibrahim almost slaughtered his son Ismail. What kind of answer is this? They said, yeah, this is the shara of those who were before us, the laws of earlier divine religions. This is totally unacceptable, because in our Islam we have everything covered. So for example, if someone says that prostrating to others is permissible as a form of greeting, so like the Japanese would bow to one another, this is halal. We say it's haram. They said, no, this is halal. Why do you say it's halal? They said, because Yusuf, as mentioned in the Quran, all of his family came and prostrated to him. And Allah ordered the angels to prostrate to Adam. So such greeting is okay. We say, listen, in our religion, we don't have to go back to the religions before us. Our religion clearly states that this is haram. The Prophet said, if I were to order a man to prostrate to someone else, I would have ordered women to prostrate to their husbands. But there is no prostration. No one prostrates except to Allah Azza wa Jal. So Again, this is something that is found in the books of fiqh as a form or a source of legislation, and we just mentioned it to get acquainted with it. Number 8, prevention of what leads to the prohibited, and this is called saddu dhara'i'. And generally speaking, this is blocking the means. So, for example, what's wrong in looking at a woman? So what's wrong if I, as a man, looked at a woman? I know she has eyes and she has a body, she has hair. All women do that. She's like my mom, my sister. No. This usually leads to something else, which is liking, and then initiating a conversation, and then let's have coffee, and then let's have dinner, and then my place or yours. Oof. So this leads to all of that, but it may not lead to all of that. So Islam blocks all the means that may lead to haram. So yes, a woman applying perfume and going out where men can find her perfume smell, a scent, haram, as if she is a fornicator, because this is blocking the means. So a lot of the rules and regulations in Islam has this in it. And I'll have one more question, one more that is what? Remind me. I'll talk about the last part, and we will postpone the leading fiqh scholars, founders of the 4 schools of thought, to next class, inshallah azza, because we will definitely not have enough time. The last point of source of legislation is called al-istishab. An istishab generally is to leave everything as a default. So for example, what's the ruling on using the mobile? The default is it's halal, because using anything in this universe is halal unless proven otherwise. Okay, what about its purity? If I touch it, do I have to wash my hands? The answer, the default, al-istishab, is that it is pure and that your wudu is intact unless proven otherwise, and touching the mobile does not break your wudu. So generally speaking, al-istishab is to hold on to the default. What is the default? Everything in this world I can eat and consume and drink, unless proven otherwise. It's haram. And everything around us, the carpets, the curtains, the table, is pure. It's halal. It is permissible to buy. It is permissible to sell. It is permissible to use. This is al-istishab, because this solves a lot of problems to you, especially for those who have OCD. When they come and say, Sheikh, I did this and I did that, and then something happened and someone walked on the spot of the ground, so is my whole house impure? What is this? I get so many questions like this. People say that I had a piece of cloth with madhi, prosthetic fluid on it, and then it fell from my hand to the ground. So I picked it up, but I walked on that spot and went throughout the house, living room, the bedroom, the kitchen. So now I'm having doubts that the whole house is contaminated and I should sell it and move elsewhere. A'udhu billah. What is this? She says because it's contaminated and it's all najis. Akhi, first of all, are you 100% sure that the ground, when your piece of cloth with madhi on fell, that it was transferred to the floor? I said, no, but not most likely. Are you 100% sure? He says, no. So, and then al-istishab means that it is by default pure and clean. Don't allow shaitan to mess up with your mind like this and play with you, because this is all what shaitan wants from you. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us among those who learn His religion and have fiqh and understanding in it. In the remaining few minutes, we have a number of questions. So question number one, is there any prohibition to give or take money to or from others at the time of Maghrib Adhan? Please kindly reply. You answer me. The istishab. It says, can I take or give money at the time of the Adhan of Maghrib? What is the default? The default is halal. Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, Dhuhr, anytime I can exchange money, because there is nothing to prevent it. There is no hadith, for example, like the hadith that's stating that selling and buying after the Adhan of Jumu'ah, of Friday, is prohibited. This is the only thing we have about Jumu'ah, Friday. And the Adhan is called, which is the second Adhan, where the Imam says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and sit down, and then the Adhan is called. This is the Adhan where after it you cannot sell or buy. But other than that, again, istishab, the default, you're okay. Apply what you've heard simply, as much as possible, to these questions. Faisal Afaq says, can I pray Dhuhr Sunnah after the Fard? Well, we know that the Sunnah of Dhuhr is 4 rak'ah, 2 plus 2, before the Fard, and 2 rak'ahs after the Fard. These are the emphatic prayers. There are another 2 rak'ahs after the Fard, so it makes it 4, but these additional 2 are not emphatic. But if you do them, you are rewarded. So if a person misses the first 4 rak'ahs, or 2 of them, for a legitimate reason, he was preoccupied, they did not allow him to leave the class, he had a meeting which was urgent, he forgot, and all of a sudden the iqamah was given, there's no problem at all in making them up after the Fard prayer, inshaAllah. Can one take things on installments? Is it permissible? Now, the vast majority of scholars say that buying things in installments is halal. Some scholars say that this is not permissible, and among them is Sheikh Al-Albani, but the vast majority, and Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah said that this is permissible, Bin Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen, the whole 9 yards, providing that there are 2 conditions to be fulfilled. Condition number 1, that you buy what you're buying from the owner. Because nowadays, if I come to you and I say, I'd like to buy this mobile from you, and you said, I don't have the mobile, but I can get it from a third party. And I said, okay, how much? And you would say, this mobile costs £100. I'll sell it to you over the period of 2 years for £125. I said, that's fine, that's cool with me. And he said, sign these contracts are binding, and you're obliged to transfer this amount to my bank account. Done deal, done deal. I go and buy the mobile phone and I give it to the customer, and alhamdulillah. This is haram. Why? Because when I sold you the mobile, I had no interest in buying or selling. My interest is in giving you £100 loan and getting it back to 125. There's no risk on me of this mobile. I'm being stuck with it. I can't sell it to anyone, and I have to go maybe below £100, maybe a little bit more. There's no risk. This is haram. You must buy in installments from the owner. So I can do to justify this is when you come and say, I'd like to buy this mobile phone, I said, come after a couple of days. I go and buy the phone and I bring it in my shop. 2 days later, you come and say, did you get the phone? I said, yes, here's the phone. I'll sell it for you for 125. You have the option to say, no, that's too much. Tell you what, I changed my mind. I'm going to buy something else. I have no right to say, hey, I bought this for you. Now I'm stuck with it. No, this is selling and buying. There is the risk of making a profit or making a loss. So this is condition number one. So, okay, I'm buying it from the owner. The second condition is that the final price is fixed and done. So when you come and buy this and I tell you, okay, I own the phone, I'll sell it for you or to you for 125 pounds. You should agree. So I give it to you and you start paying in installments. Couple of months down the line, you call and say, listen, Akhi, I'm in deep financial problems and I think I'm not gonna be able to pay you for that installment for a couple of months. So please, can you bear with me? And I said, no, I can't. If you're gonna delay by 2 months, you have to make it 130 pounds. So I will add to it for the delay. And you say, okay, this is riba. Likewise, if the final price, and this happens in mortgages, is fluctuating due to inflation, due to the interest rate. And so the agreement was that I buy the property for $1 million. 6-7 months, he says, well, now it's $1,200,000. A year later, it's $1,300,000. What is this? This is totally prohibited, and this is riba that is not accepted. These are all the 3 questions that we have for today, and I don't know if we have any more questions. The admins, do we have any more questions? I don't think so. Anyhow, next Monday, inshallah, we will be addressing the origin of the 4 schools of thought. The madhab, the school of thought of Abu Hanifa, of Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad. And we have one last question. Islam says no compulsion in Islam. Well, it's in religion. Why killing those who leave Islam? Okay, that's a very logical question. Now, is killing others justifiable? This depends on where you're coming from. If you're a Muslim, you said yes, this is a prescribed punishment. If you're a Christian or a Jew, you know that this is an eye for an eye, a life for a life, etc. So yeah, this is part of the divine religions. Now we come to no compulsion in religion. No compulsion in religion means that there is no hardship in religion. Allah did not order us to do something that is beyond our ability. Allah did not order us to fly or to walk on the water. All the religion is easy for all human beings worldwide to practice and implement. This is what is meant by La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. There is no hardship in religion. As for a penalty, when a person rapes your sister, tortures her, and kills her, if there is no compulsion in religion, would you advocate for the death penalty or not? Definitely you will say yes. Those who go around and sell our children drugs and make them addicted to meth, to crack, to marijuana, these are people who spoil and corrupt the earth. Would you advocate in killing them because putting them in jail or fining them would only encourage them to engage more? The answer is yes. in religion, as a Muslim, Allah is the one who tells us to do or not to do. So for you guys in the West, freedom of speech is honored. In Islam, it is honored as well, but with boundaries. When you come and say that it's part of my freedom of speech to slander your mother, to say trash about your sister and daughter, we say, hey, wait, you will be flogged 80 lashes, because this is not acceptable and not permissible in Islam. So in Islam, it is not up to you to embrace Islam and then apostatize, because we have rules and regulations. You don't want to accept Islam from the beginning? Don't. Remain in your religion. But to come and accept Islam and then leave Islam, this is a crime that is the cardinal sin. This is something that has to be punishable in Islam to protect Islam and the Muslims. And throughout time, they are a negligible percentage, less than a percentage even, those who reject Islam with the grace of Allah. Look at the Muslims. The only country that may consider implementing execution for apostasy can be Saudi Arabia and Iran. Maybe. And this is, Allahu Alam, how it is implemented. Yet, the fastest growing religion in the world is Islam. What does this tell you? People in Indonesia, they can apostatize whenever they want. No one would tell them that this is wrong or will put you in jail. You change your religion to Christianity, whatever. No problem in that. So this should not be something that deters you from thinking of the whole big picture. It's like someone saying, I hate violence and I hate cutting people up, so I'll not be a surgeon because I don't like blood. Look at the bigger picture, helping people, saving people's life, etc. And likewise in Islam, this is what we have to do. And I'm afraid that this brings us to the end of today's session. So I'm looking forward for meeting you Monday. I hope inshallah we'll have less glitches like we had today. And until we meet then, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.